The Crouchy Old Man Podcast is not a registered investment, legal, or tax advisor or a broker-dealer. All investment financial opinions expressed by or on the Crouchy Old Man Podcast are from the personal research and experience of the owner of the site and are intended as educational material. Although best efforts are made to ensure that all information is accurate and up to date, occasionally unintended errors and misprints may occur. Before you invest or make any investment-based decisions, consider your own personal circumstances. You should do your own research and seek advice from a financial professional.
Hello, once again to the Crouchy Old Man Podcast. Hello, I'm Gary Smith, one of the co-hosts with the Crouchy Old Men, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome each and every person out there that's listening to us. But more importantly, let me introduce the crew in the studio. Over here to my left, my main man, PC, Paul Clemens. What up, Doe?
What up, Doe?
Yes, it's a wonderful day in the village, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Then over here to my right is my main partner, George Cromley. What up, Cromley?
What up, Smitty? How you doing today?
Man, we're doing exceedingly well, man. I got all three. Okay. Like it's four of us, right? That's that caffeine going, Mellors. That's that caffeine, baby. Tell about it, Dr. Clemens.
Oh, yeah, that'll get the heart pumping. That's for
Yes,
sure.
sir. I'm seeing double, man. I said four of us. But right now there's three of us in the studio today. And we got some fun stuff to talk about. So I'm going to pass the mic on over to George Cromley, kick it off. And then you know what we do, fellas.
Thanks, Smitty. Yeah, another wonderful day. You know, I as I look and assess, what kind of things can help our audience, one of the things that I stumbled upon was property tax, one of the things that's sometimes overlooked. So, I thought that would be a good subject to just kind of talk about and kick it around and just tell you about, something that will here again save you some money. Because, we take for granted, those of us that own houses, we talk about buying houses and whatnot. But property taxes is one of those line items that, doesn't go away. You're going to pay that regardless if the house is paid off or if you still have a mortgage, property tax will continue. But what we may not know is that we can appeal those property taxes every year. And I think that's very important, just to get that word out, if nothing else. And go ahead.
So what are some of the basics for appealing a property tax in the first place?
Well, as far as the basis for appealing property taxes, the fact that you feel like your property has been assessed at a higher value than it may be worth. Take for example, there's a couple ways to appeal your property tax, and you normally that's a comparable, which is meaning your next door neighbor, your across the street, down the street neighbor. They may have done some improvements because every time you do a significant improvement on your home, you're supposed to get a permit. So that permit basically serves two functions. One is to make sure that you're doing everything to code, but it's also telling the government or that city official that you've now enhanced your property. Therefore, you may be subject to additional property tax. And that could be, like adding an additional room, adding a garage, going upstairs and adding a whole new floor, upgrading your bathrooms, your kitchen, and all those kind of things add value, which you hope, and that's, usually reason that you do those kind of things is so that you can add additional value to your home. But the thing that people sometimes overlook is the fact that if my neighbor does those kind of things, it may affect my property tax also.
Well, that sounds like a twofer to me. On the one hand, yeah, you want to add value. But on the other hand, you don't want to pay for that value in terms of taxes because your tax
Right.
bill is going to go up. And so consequently, I see now why there's so many people in Home Depot getting lumber and stuff like that to add these decks, but they ain't pulling no permits though. Not until it's time to sell.
Well,
That's when they want to go ahead, George.
Well, I mean, that's an assumption on your part because here again, if you do something like a major renovation, like you said, a deck, and you don't pull a permit, and when you get ready to sell that house, if that deck does not meet code, they can make you tear it down. So
Oh,
that's the same.
absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're supposed to pull a permit if you put in a new water heater.
Yep.
If you put in a new HVAC system, those and the company that you're using should pull a permit. And if they're not, then you may need to investigate the company that you're using. That
But
should be normal
you only
procedure.
have to pull a permit for a deck if it's attached to the house in some way, shape, or form, as opposed to a floating deck that's not that doesn't necessarily have attachments to the house. Is that right?
Seems to me like each state and each locale or county would probably have certain protocols or stuff like that. I'm not
Sure.
an expert. I understand that we're going to invite an expert to come on to the podcast here in another week or so to perhaps address stuff like that. But but since George is sharing with us some experiences of to going through that process, he may or may not be prepared for that question, but here's one I think you probably would be, George, is this. That process, as Paul was alluding to, did you have to physically go down to the county assessor's office, or was this something that you could at least start the process or do the process with from a computer at home?
Okay, well that's a good question. That's probably a good place to start. Okay, so I've been in my house for 30 years, and when I first purchased the home, a good friend of mine, first thing he told me was you should appeal your property tax. So basically, he helped me write a letter. Basically, so let me back a little bit. You're going to get an assessment every year, which is a document, and it'll say this is not a bill. But the interesting thing about it is if your taxes are impounded every month when you pay your note, meaning that you pay your property tax payment to the mortgage company, and they in turn send it to the property Department of Equalization at the end of the year. That does not stop you from appealing your property tax. A lot of people say, "Well, I don't pay my property tax." They're paid automatically, but you still have the ability to appeal them. In my situation, I don't have my property tax impounded or escrowed by the mortgage company. I pay them separately, and that's just if you pay 20% down, you have anything you owe less than 80% on the value of your home. That's a different subject. But anyway, sticking to the subject, you get a letter, you get a notification. This is what you paid last year. This is what you paid this year. If you're lucky, nothing changes, or if it changes slightly. Like I said, the first year I appealed them. I won the appeal, which basically froze my taxes for the next 3 years. And that's one of the advantages of appealing your taxes, that once you appeal and win or lose, meaning if they go up or they go down, you still freeze them at that level for the next 3 years. So for those that don't think there's a benefit, there is a benefit in appealing your taxes, every 3 years, because of the fact that they will now be frozen. So I've probably, so like I said, I've been in my house for 30 years. I've probably appealed them at least 4 or 5 times. So, and you can do this. You can do it every year, but you have to keep in mind, if you do it every year, if your taxes go up, your appeal that you won the previous year, or the new assessment the previous year, will be erased, and whatever they decide that year will take its place. So you have to be careful about doing it every year. What I do is, like I said, every 3 years, and that's when it expires. So long story short, I appealed it 3 years ago, so it renewed last year in 2023. My next door neighbor made significant improvements in their property, which affected my property tax, and that's what really, to the tune of probably about I'd say about a 60% increase in my taxes.
Quick question. How did that affect your property before? I mean, your neighbor didn't sell his home or anything, just by them adding value to their property?
No, they
That
sold it.
Oh, they sold it. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
they
Oh,
sell. Yeah, when you sell your properties, there's an automatic thing that happens, which basically says now the value of the properties or the comparables in your neighborhood have changed because the sales value has changed. So that's what happened. He made a significant improvement. uh, property taxes went up. So, and I was at the end of the 3 years, so I appealed them. Like I said, previously I had appealed them by letter. I think 3 years ago when I appealed it, we settled on an amount which was acceptable to me for the increase, which was lower than the increase they projected. I agreed to it. I didn't have to go to the actual appeals board. But this year or 2023 was the first time I actually uh, disputed it. I prepared comps, sent them a letter. They sent me basically sent me a note and said, well, based on your information, we deny your appeal, but you have the opportunity to come to the board and appeal again, which I took that option up. I actually got a date time, and because of COVID, I guess they have an option. You can do it on Zoom, but I wanted to actually go down. So I went down to the Board of Equalization, and interesting to my surprise, the board is actually made up of 4 people. 3 of those people, which are residents just like us. They've been trained to look at property tax and make recommendations to the actual person that works for the city on, what if your appeal is acceptable or not. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, so you basically sit in a board of your peers, homeowners just like you are, and they serve a particular term. Like I said, they take classes. They're educated in what they're looking at. But it's a board of your peers, which I thought was pretty interesting.
I can
I
see
got another
not.
question. I got another question for you, George. When you consider the fact that you want an appeal for whatever the reason, and let's say there's 2 or 3 or 4 other people in your neighborhood that is looking at the same situation you are looking at to offer a basis for an appeal. Is there an advantage or an opportunity for more than one person to come to make an appeal, making it a little stronger for the appellates?
Well, here again, I recommend that everybody appeal their property tax, you know, every 3 years, because here again, like I said, it locks in that rate for the next 3 years. So like I said, in my situation, I had a very affordable property tax, which I thought was uh, matched my property for the last 3 years. And like I said, the one I got in 2023 was probably 60% higher. So there was an advantage to me by doing that, because if I hadn't appealed them 3 years ago, they probably would have gradually gone up.
But the
So
question I'm
let me
asking,
let me let me let me finish. I'm gonna answer your question.
okay, okay.
I'm not gonna do the political thing. I'm not gonna jump around, but I say that because I want people to understand that you should appeal your taxes. Now, should you appeal them in a mass group? You know, should I take every neighbor in the neighborhood down and say, let's go down here and to the board? Personally, I don't know if that's an advantage or not. I've never done that. I've never investigated that. But when you appeal your property tax, and you do a comparable, which is one of the methods that you can use, it's based on the size, it's based on the number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms in your home compared to the
Other,
higher
other.
value the higher value property. So one of the things that I used in my comparables was the fact that my house was a lot smaller than the houses in my neighborhood. I don't have a basement. I have not done any significant upgrades. So, because normally when you're going to sell your house, what do? You upgrade the kitchen, you upgrade the bathrooms. So that's
And
kind
they
of
let you get away with saying your house was smaller?
what. Yeah, and you look at the dimensions. Well, I mean, here again, numbers don't lie. My house could be the same size, square footage wise, but if they have a basement, that's probably adding another 1,200 square feet to their home, which allows that home to be larger than mine. So
Here's
a basement makes a significant difference.
okay. Let's go back to this valuation piece because again, there's a dichotomy. At least I got the dichotomy here. On the one hand, you buy real estate, especially a home, but real estate in general, with the hope that that property is going to appreciate in value. That's what you want, I thought, is that for your home to go from $500,000 to become worth $1,000,000 someday, or at least 650, 700,000. And that does two things for you as a homeowner. Number one, the higher the valuation, if you're looking to refinance, because most people, unless they're going to go buy another house, buy another house, buy another house, which is not usually this thing happening with residential, is that you're going to stay in that house until you pay it off and all that sort of good stuff. And there's a lot of people out here right now that's cash poor but equity rich. You're sitting in a house that's paid off. It's appreciated. It's gone from 250,000, let's say, to 500,000. It's doubled in value over the past 10 years. Now, true to your point, you could go down and you could argue the point, I want to reduce my taxes. The property's next door selling for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, raising your property up. That's an opportunity for you to take some more money out of your house, your property, and invest it in other areas because of that equity. As far as doing a refi. If your property's value, you go down and you dispute this and you want the valuation to be lower, seem like you it's kind of like you're shooting yourself in the foot. And I might not be putting that clear enough, but George, you understand it enough. You're a broker, so help me out here with my own.
I mean, Gary, that's an excellent point, because the person that's just the normal person that owns a piece of property probably thinks the same way. But there's a separation there. I mean, when you go to refinance your home, they never ask you what the tax value is. See, the tax assessment is based on 40% of the value of your home.
Excuse me,
your home,
just a second. So I wanted to make sure I was clear. I'm not talking about the tax part. I'm talking about valuation now, because
right.
Because the taxes is based upon the value, right?
Taxes based on 40%
right.
of the value.
So what you're actually going down when you're disputing those taxes, that, hey, you charge me more taxes. My
right.
value is not that high. My value is lower than that.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay. All right. That's what we're talking
about. What I'm saying, but what I'm saying is, when you go to the bank to refinance your home, they never ask you what the tax value of your home is.
I know they don't. That's not the issue. You go to the bank, it's based on value.
Right.
When you go to complain about your taxes being high, it's based upon what? The value. Right. I'm still talking value here. I'm not talking taxes. Right. Okay. Right. Taxes are a derivative of the value.
Right.
So if the value is up, of course the tax is going to go up.
Right.
But you just say, oh, no, I don't want to pay higher taxes. I want my taxes to be lower. Well, how are they going to lower them? By lowering the value.
Right.
Well, to my point about refinancing.
Right.
If the value has gone from 250 to 500,000, then your taxes went from 5,000 to 7,000. But you want to get a refinance. I'm just going to use simple numbers. 80% of 500,000 is 400,000. But if you go down there and say, I want my taxes to be lower, my house is not worth 500,000. It's only worth 400. Well, look what happened to your equity. 80% of 400,000 is now 320. You just left $180,000 on the table of equity. Is that $180,000 worth? I mean, the taxes, a couple of dollars you save in taxes, worth $180,000 in equity? That's
okay. Listen to me, Gary. When you appeal your property, when you go to refinance your home or take equity out of your home, they don't ask you what you paid on taxes. These two parties don't talk to each other. There's no correlation between what your property tax evaluation is and how much your equity is on your house when you're talking to the bank of whoever. They don't look and say, okay, well, heck, you only pay, your evaluation on your taxes is only X.
They look at the comps. You just mentioned.
Right, well, your comps don't change. The comps don't change, Gary.
Why wouldn't they change? If
Why
your
would
neighbor,
they change, Gary?
if your neighbor, well, you just
Yeah,
gave the
comps change
example.
all the time. They change all
Yeah,
the
but
time depending on what's going
but,
on in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
I
but
just want clarity.
the
You just
comps
said if
don't
your neighbor. Okay, go ahead.
the comps don't change based on my property tax. If I go
No,
down,
the
okay,
comps
so
change based on value.
correct.
Your neighbor's house went up in
No,
value,
no, no, no. Comps change based on sales.
and sales value. Sales. Still talking value.
Okay,
It's
but you're
based
not.
on sale. But you
You-
said your neighbor sold his house, which made your. Okay, well, go ahead.
good. So what I'm trying to get you to understand, Gary, is when I go down, if I go down and pay my property tax and they lower the value of my home, and I go the next day to the Bank of America and say, I want to get a refinance because my home is worth X now. They don't say, well, what did you pay in property tax? They don't even ask what you paid in property tax. All they still look at is the guy next door sold his house for X amount, which doesn't change. And based on the fact that my house is next door, it should be worth this amount. They don't ask you about it's two separate items
Okay,
altogether.
George, let's go on to another question. I think you misunderstood my question. I know full well when you go down to get a loan, they don't ask you about your property taxes. We don't
Okay.
know that. That's not what
Okay.
I'm talking about. I'm talking about the comparables or the valuation of the property. In order for you, let's see if we can agree on this.
Okay.
Your taxes are based upon the value of your home. Is that a true statement or no?
That's the true statement.
Okay, so if that's the case, the only time about taxes are going to go up to the point where you're going to appeal them is if your property value has increased. Would that be a true statement?
Correct.
Okay. If at that point in time you decided you wanted to refinance because everything else going around you in the world is favorable, interest rates and all that jive.
Right.
Now you got a higher valuation, which means you can get more money.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Right. If I don't go down there based upon
Wait.
these,
Okay. Here
it's on the
again.
comps.
Stay right there.
Okay.
So stay right there. So if you basically said that the value of my home has gone up, and I'm going to go and I'm going to refinance it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would make that mortgage company or that bank say that you have appealed your property tax?
Nothing.
Okay, so then why am I not answering your question?
Because I'm talking about valuation, not taxes, but I'm talking about, and I think where it's got muddy, that where taxes are derived from. They're derived from valuation. Let's stop there. We just agree with that. But now that we're at the valuation part, and if my neighbor just sold his home and for $650, and I'm thinking mine was worth $550, that value brings that because that comp in that area, that raises all the houses in that area, right? If they're the same size, same square footage, blah, blah, blah. Would that be a fair statement because of those comps or no?
You said this raised it based on the fact that he sold his house at a certain price? Yes.
At a higher price, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that comp is going to be what I'm going to use anyway. If nobody else uses that comp, I'm going to use that comp. Why? Because I'm trying to get more money, whether I'm selling a house or I'm refinancing. But right now, I'm refinancing.
Right.
Now,
nothing changes that.
Nothing changes that. Okay. Right. So now, if I was to go down to the county assessor's office,
totally separate issue.
I get that. I don't want to pay that tax. So does the value of my house, how are they going to reduce my taxes if they don't reduce the value? Maybe that's the question I should ask.
So here again, your objective is to prove to them why your house is not valued at that same amount.
Why my house is less expensive than the one that this comp say is more expensive. Right. What I'm trying to do is appeal to you. Hey, my house is not worth that much.
I don't have a basement. I didn't upgrade my bathrooms. So basically, my house is not worth 60% more than it was 3 years ago because I haven't done these improvements.
Exactly. Right. So let's stay there. So now I want to refinance my house.
Right.
I could have got this higher comp because the banks and everybody else, all lenders going to look at comparables.
Correct. Same comparables, same comparables.
Exactly. But since
you answer your own question.
I think about that. So my value, okay, I just need to make this clear though. So my value did not decrease, although I went down and told them to decrease my taxes. Correct. There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
That's what I thought I answered the first time.
How do they base it on? How do they base it? Just because you don't have Okay, they can't even use that comp if it's not a comparable to your house. Hell, you can't compare a house with a basement to one that doesn't have one. That's ridiculous. Nobody does that. That's not a true comparable. They'd have to throw that out anyway. How are you going to compare? Yeah,
Well,
you can't do that.
not necessarily true.
Well, they should throw it out. Go
When
ahead.
you're talking, no, I mean when you're talking about selling, I mean that's funny because I talked to a buddy of mine yesterday who basically said that the property next door to him just sold, and these are $1 million homes, sold for more than his house. He bought his house for 2 years ago, and it's got a smaller lot and it's a smaller house.
Mm-hmm.
So the market drives the sale of homes based on supply and demand, as you know. But when you talk about, excuse me,
I thought we was making comparisons to like property. That's when you're doing a comparison, comparables for comps for any buyer or seller of real property. You're doing it with property of like kind, square
but
footage.
understood. But the market still drives the cost of the property. Now it's up to the bank to say whether they're going to loan you that amount of money for that particular house at that particular time, knowing that the house next door, you know, is a higher value than your home, basically, like you said, based on those comps. Okay. And if that house does not appraise based on the comparables, then right, that buyer has to come up with the difference in the payment. But that's totally up to the bank. But what I'm trying to get you to understand based on your question is what the city or the Board of Equalization decides is the fair market value of your property, which is going to be 40% of which they'll take 40% of that, and that'll be your property tax, has nothing to do with you refinancing your house or what you sell your house for. It's two separate things. Now, if the bank or the Board of Equalization comes back and says, sorry, Mr. Crumley, your house is comparable to that house next door that just sold for X. And no, we're not going to lower your property tax. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else that you can do. I mean, you could probably appeal it again to somebody else, but it's still going to be based on their assessment and your documentation, whether they're going to change that. Now, when I say I won my appeal, they didn't lower my taxes back down to what it originally was. They still raised my taxes, but they still raised the value of my home, which affected my taxes, but they didn't raise it as much as they had initially said because of the documentation that I provided. But I want to make it perfectly clear in answering your question. And because that's funny because someone else asked me the same thing. Well, George, if you went down and appealed your taxes, and here again, the objective is you want your house to be worth more. But remember, here again, your house is only worth more if you're trying to do something, take money out of it or sell your home. Because on paper, and here goes back to the evaluation of taxes, that's what you're dealing with is on paper. So I'm not trying to take any money out. I'm not trying to do those. So on paper, basically, I want the lowest valuation I can possibly get. And that's going to be based on the documentation. But like you said, when I'm trying to sell it, I'm trying to get the highest valuation so I can get as much money out of it as possible. Those may seem like they don't agree, but it's two separate processes, two separate departments. They don't talk to each other. And one really has no basis on the other. Like I said, when you sell your house, no one's going to go back and look at your property tax bill and say, oh, wait a minute. You only paid X number of dollars on your property tax. Therefore, you can't sell your house for this amount because your valuation is not that amount. They don't look at it like that. They look at, like you said, they go and look at the comp next door and say, well, this guy's house is comparable to yours. So, yeah, you can sell it for this amount.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What do you think about that, PC? You're awfully quiet over there.
I think George kind of got us started. We having a guest coming in a couple of weeks that could kind of help us top this conversation off. So I'd be curious to see what he has to say. But sound like George kind of has this process on lock, if you ask me.
Well, it's definitely something that people need to know that number
For
one,
sure.
they can do. Probably a lot of folks out here paying taxes, grumbling and mumbling, or either losing their properties, worst case scenario, because their inability to pay taxes when they didn't know either the process for going down or appealing them or what have you, or they didn't know what things that could affect their home and why their taxes went up.
True
So it's
that.
good to know why your taxes went up. So I think the conversation thing that what George has brought to us today is that, hey, number one, awareness. Did you know, okay, that when your property taxes are increased, there's something you can do. You can participate in your own rescue. You may or may not always win the war, but heck, you at least need to know that there's a battle going on and there's some things that's in your favor that you could utilize to minimize or probably, reduce or whatever those taxes. So I think that point was very, very, thank you, George, for bringing that out.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
and I just want to add a couple more things. When you buy your home, the first thing you need, this is if it's going to be your main residence, first thing you need to look at is your homeowner's exemption. You get a homeowner's exemption if you live in that home. You don't get a homeowner's exemption if you're buying it for investment property. But you need to make sure that you get that. Your real estate agent should tell you about that and make sure you file that paper, because that's a significant savings off of what you will on your property tax every year. Once you turn a certain age, I think it's 62. You can also, depending on what city and what state you live in, you can also get exemptions. If you're a disabled veteran, or if you're disabled, there's exemptions that you can get from property taxes. But there are a lot of exemptions out there. Florida has a lot of exemptions. Like, I think when you're in Florida, you don't have to pay because in your property tax there's taxes for schools. There's things like that are in your tax. So obviously, when you get to a certain age, you don't necessarily want to be paying for the
You don't
schools in
have
the
that
area.
interest
So,
anymore.
exactly. So there's exemptions for that. So I say to say is check your city, state, um, Board of Equalization and find out what exemptions you're entitled to as a homeowner, so that you take advantage of everything. Because, like I said, here again, our motto on the Crouchy Old Man is pay as less taxes, pay as less interest as you possibly can. So here again, it's knowledge is power. Knowing the law, knowing what you're able to do as a homeowner. Because, like I said, we talk and we push all the time: buy a house, be a homeowner. But you need to know that there's things that come along with that. And I'm going to end it with this last thing. They encourage the Board of Equalization encourages you to go through this process. That's why they lock it in for 3 years, because they want you to do
Why do you
this.
suppose that is,
They
George?
want you
Why do you suppose that is?
because of the kind of things that I talked about. They don't really have enough eyes and ears and feet on the ground to go around and assess the actual value of your home. So you as a homeowner need to be able to go forward, have a process to go forward and say, hey, look, wait a minute. My property is not really valued at this. So, it's almost like a blind assessment. They don't have enough feet on the ground to actually go out and assess every home. So it's almost like they're deputizing you to come forth and say, hey, my property is not worth this amount. It's not, the valuation is too high.
You know,
So yeah, that's why.
other thing as we all know, your school district, schools are supported through property taxes.
Correct.
And so if you're in a neighborhood, that's one thing we kind of have to watch though, because if you're in a neighborhood and everybody's trying to keep a lid on the value of those properties, what in essence they do is that they take away some of the money that could be going toward funding the schools. And so now those funds have to come from some other sources, because if they're not coming from the property tax, where are they going to come from? So there's a two-sided sword to this whole process. So where on the one hand, yeah, makes sense. You want to say that taxes are a deduction. Okay, you want to save that, and you want to pay as few little taxes as necessary. I get that. But the flip side is that how else are you where those dollars going to come from for city services? Where those dollars going to come from for the schools and all those type of things, fire
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So in that particular county or that particular locale, while they may hold those taxes down for 3 years or whatever, that's 3 years of lower revenue stream that they're collecting
Well,
and
not
doing that.
necessarily.
3-year period of time, you got inflation and the cost of goods and sales going up.
Not necessarily, because every time you sell, or every time somebody sells a home, they're automatically going to get an increase in their property tax. That property tax, because we don't have a frozen property tax like they have in California, where it always reverts back. But when you sell your property, you're automatically going to get an increase in property tax. You're not going to necessarily pay what the guy paid before, because
Oh, yeah, we
you're
get
paying
that.
more for that. So that's where you're going to get the additional funds from. But those people that stay in these homes for years and years and years, like you said before, the elderly, that's getting these
That's
huge
why
increase.
neighborhoods deteriorate.
Excuse me.
Sure. That's another reason why neighborhoods deteriorate. If you got a neighborhood that's gentrified of a lot of old people, and number one, first thing an old person's gonna say, well, hell, I don't have no kids in school. Let me see if I can get rid of this thing right here. I can opt out, do whatever I got to do. But more importantly, their homes, if they're not appreciating in value, their taxes remain low or they never go up or whatever. If there's any schools in that area or anything else, that particular neighborhood, just put it like that. I see it here in Detroit all the time. Certain neighborhoods, man, you better not have a fire. You better pull out your garden hose, okay? Because heck, there's only one house for every 16 blocks, all right? And then there's other portions of the cities whereas that shucks. You got a lot of houses that's only worth about 10 or 15,000 daggone dollars. So there's no tax revenue to support the school. So what happened? We got all these empty school buildings.
Gary, it's not necessarily true. I mean, I hear what you're saying in theory, but your property tax are voted on every year, and there is a increase in the millage rate. There's an increase on if you approve a bond for your particular area, those go in. So it's very seldom that your property tax will stay year to year to year the same, regardless if you sell or not, regardless if you have exemptions or not. Basically, the exemptions help elderly people, not necessarily skirt of not paying for the schools, because there's still going to be a certain amount that's going to go towards those programs. But what it is saying is that you've reached an age and you may be exempt from not total property tax, but here again, there's an amount of money that will be taken away from your property. So you're not paying the full amount as a young adult that just bought the house that has 4 kids in school. So it all balances out, but it's not a situation where, you just are not paying property tax because you've gotten to a certain age. You're still going to pay property tax. Trust me. There's enough money out there. What you're getting into is the government or your local municipality using the money correctly to support, the residents and providing the services. But there's plenty of money to go around. Trust me.
I believe that. All right. This has been a great conversation. Yeah, it's been good. We can't let
yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we'll educate our their ability and what they have a right to do as far as a homeowner. Because like I said, a lot of people I talked to didn't know they could even appeal their property tax. Out of sight, out of mind, because of the fact that it's escrowed every month. So they think they have no means to do that. But here again, like I said, the government encourages you to do that, and you should do that. If nothing else, but to get it frozen for 3 years.
Right.
And with that said, guys, hey man, that's all I got. I mean, I enjoyed it. Hopefully it's enlightened some of our folks. So as usual, what words of pearls of wisdom do we have to send us out of here with?
Well, let's start
what you
with
got,
this.
Smitty?
Okay, look here. Taken from the power of now. Whenever we see and judge the present through the eyes of the past, we get a totally distorted view of everything.
Right. Eckhart Tolle, baby. Eckhart Tolle. That's my man.
As recorded here.
All right, hey, look here. If you didn't know,
as we say,
now you know.
Now you know. You take care. Be blessed. Peace.